This is one of my best rifle builds to date. It's a 7 PRC, and in this video, I'm going to tell you all about it. Gavin here from UltimateReloader.com. 7 PRC is new, it's hot. I've got two rifle builds, including this Bat HR build with MDT ESS. We're going to go over that in detail in the series, but you're going to want to check out the rest of the videos on 7 PRC, including a high-level overview of 7 PRC, a comparison of all three different PRC cartridges, reloading for the PRC, my full custom bat build, my full custom Bergara build, a rifle builder's guide for 7mm PRC, and more. That is a lot of really cool content related to 7 PRC. In this video, we're going to cover kind of a recap of 7 PRC quick facts, kind of what is it and what are the basic specs. I'm going to go over the bill of materials for this particular build. We'll cover all of the tools that I used to pull off this build. The Bat HR action, this is a new long action. Wanted to tell you about that, the different options and the different specs. The MDT ESS chassis, another chassis that I've worked with for the first time here on the channel with this build. The chambering process, Cerakote and laser. This is a new combination for this particular build. Really, really cool stuff, and to share also some initial results that I've gotten with the rifle. Okay, so 7 PRC quick facts. You're going to want to check out my overview video if you want to know kind of the full story. Announced October 26th at NASGW just very recently. It's a 7mm. It has a 2.280 inch case length, 3.340 inch cartridge overall length, the same as 300 Win Mag. The case head is your standard 5.32 Magnum, 30-degree shoulder angle, large rifle Magnum primer. Here's what's really cool. Standard 1 in 8 twist weights. So you're going to be able to get factory ammunition with those longer high BC bullets that are in that heavier weight class. You're going to see about 3,000 feet per second from a 180 grain projectile, and it is not belted. Really, really good stuff. And if you look at my video comparing 6.5 PRC to 7 PRC to 300 PRC, you're going to see this thing ballistically is really the sweet spot. It's awesome. Okay, the bill of materials for this build. We've got the Bat HR action. I'll explore a little more in depth in just a moment here. The MDT ESS chassis, Bartline barrel blank, 7mm, 1 in 8, 28 inches finished length. The folks over at Bartline were really helpful. I talked to them about the 7 PRC project, and they spec'd two barrels, 22 inch for the Bergara build and 28 inch for this particular build. That kind of covers the entire envelope of different barrel lengths that you're likely to want to see in a 7 PRC. Really, really good stuff. And that 1 in 8 twist means all sorts of options with bullets. This is a new scope I'm trying here, the Blackhound Emerge 4-32 by 56 in mil. I've got MDT 34mm scope rings and a Bixen Andy Tac Sport trigger. Okay, for tools, again, I'm using my Precision Matthews TL1660 lathe. This thing is massive, it's rigid, it's precise, it's made in Taiwan. This is probably the best turnkey solution that you're going to find in this price range for a ultra precision gunsmithing lathe. I also have my PM1440 GT. It's a 14x40, has a much shorter spindle, which is super handy for certain jobs, such as threading a muzzle when you don't want to do a complete tear down. You can even leave on the trigger, and you have that short spindle that allows you to dial in a barrel in that particular way. Okay, SSG true bore alignment system. This thing is awesome. If you've got a really long spindle like what I've got in this lathe that allows you to fully support your barrel shank with a 6-jaw chuck. I use a tapered bushing for the muzzle end, barrel taper no problem. You've got that firm grip, you've got the axial and radial alignment, allows me to dial in to pinpoint precision that portion of the bore that I'm looking at under the magnifying glass. We've also got the SSG range rod. So you use 2 bushings. In this case, I had 2 reamers, stole the bushings off of both of those and used that to do the barrel dial in. That worked really well. JGS 7mm PRC reamer and gauges. This is the standard equipment package that Hornady send out as a preview, the rifle builder's kit to select folks in the industry, including myself. I made a custom reamer holder, a rigid reamer holder, put a MT4 blank in the tailstock, machined it with tooling in the spindle, like the drill bit and like a single point boring bar to get that 7/16 bore perfect. You don't even have to worry about any alignment issues, and then you also have not only perfect alignment, but a nice rigid hold on the reamer. And these are investments I made based on the video I did with Bruce Tom about chambering, my visit to his shop. I've picked up multiple things, including the tailstock DRO, thread micrometer 0 to 1 and 1 to 2, and then this rigid reamer holder, plus pressure flush, all new for this set of builds. The Cerakote booth that I just put together, I've got the Light Armor LA2500 oven, best value going, UR100 discount code saves you $100 on that oven. Really, really good stuff. I've got an air dryer, a custom filtration system, an air evacuation system, sandblasting setup, and all that. I will do a separate kind of shop tour for the whole Cerakote end of things, and that'll be a lot of fun, so look for that video. And then I'm using the Short Action Customs modular barrel vise and modular action wrench. Super, super good stuff. Okay, so the foundation for this build is the BAT HR Action. This is the long action version of the VR, which is their varmint repeater. A lot of different options. Here's how I spec'd it out for this build. They all have a Remington 700 footprint. There's an integral recoil lug, integral 20 MOA rail, set up as a repeater. You can't set this up as a single shot, interestingly enough. It's got the fluted modular bolt. I've got two front bolt sections, one for a 338 Lapua, which is the next build for this particular rifle, and then one for the standard Magnum bolt face, which I'm using in this build, of course. It's got a 3.52 inch ejection port, a tactical bolt knob, and 1 1/8 by 16 threading for your barrel shank. And then the MDT ESS chassis. This has got a V block bedding system, which really is quite effective. When I tightened my action screws, it just felt solid. That's what I want to feel. I don't want to feel sponginess. I don't want to feel barrel deflection between the fore end and the barrel when I'm tightening down those action screws. I could feel this baby lock down. It felt planted very solidly with no bedding required. Really good stuff. Semi-flush ambi mag release down here at the front of the trigger guard. It's got AR-15 pistol grip compatibility, which is great. If you have another MDT grip or some other grip that's compatible with AR-15 that you like, you can go ahead and run that. 15-inch separate fore end slips over the barrel, and there's 3 screws down here that hold it in place. AICS magazine compatible. Available in a bunch of different inlettings and with different options. I chose the Remington 700 long action with the 3.850 inch CIP standard. And this one came with FDE Cerakote. So I Cerakoted the barreled action, and I did the laser engraving on the magazine and on the Cerakote job that came from the factory from MDT on this particular chassis. This is a really great flexible system. Okay, so in terms of the barrel work, the first part is to thread the muzzle. I used to do this in the opposite order. I used to do the breech end and then muzzle end. But with this particular lathe, I've got a barrel extension that I use so that I can pump high pressure cutting oil through it during the pressure flush portion of chambering. And then so that I can also support the outward end with the spider that I built for this lathe. So I do an initial dial in. On this one, I'm using the SSG range rod, and I get it within 1 or 2 10,000ths for the muzzle end. I get a little bit more precise on the breech end. Part off the end, turn down the tenon, cut the thread relief groove, cut a step down where your brake or your suppressor would locate initially before the threads engage, face to length, thread 5/8 by 24, and then cut the recess and the crown. Then it's time for the breech end work. So I loosen the chuck, flip the barrel around, install the barrel extension, torque that down, and do a quick pre-dial of the barrel. This is where I'm on the outside of the barrel shank. I get it to run at about 1,000th through, and then do my pre-drill. This is not an ultra precision process. We're pre-drilling for two reasons. First, we want to get rid of the bulk of the chamber material so that the reaming is a more straightforward process. And then we also need clearance for the nose of the 10,000th indicator to get in there for a final indication on the grooves in that critical throat section. So we pre-drill, we get our final dial done down to 1/10,000th of an inch in that critical throat area, at the throat area, and an inch ahead of it. It's a 2-point dial in. We don't want any angles there at all. That's the section that I care about the absolute most. Then we bore the pre-drilled area true so that when the reamer hits it, it's hitting something that's running perfectly concentric with no run out. We turn the tenon down, cut the thread relief groove, thread the tenon, cut the chamber. Okay, so this is where, for these 7 PRC builds, I've got my new high pressure flush system. This is a completely modular system. The idea is that you could add it to any lathe. This is literally just a prototype, but is working quite well. I've got a catch pan and a drain hose. It goes back to a hydraulic fluid reservoir. There's a filtration system that removes all of the metal particulates before it goes into the pump. There's a high pressure bypass where we can tune the primary pressure, and then a flow regulation ball valve to restrict the flow to an acceptable level and to fine tune. Those two different parameters enable you to have optimal results with your pressure flush. And what I did was I would go for quite a section and then stop. I would put a jag and patch in the bore, unscrew the rod, and then I have a chamber area that I can clean out with patches, check for run out, check with the bore scope, do all that good stuff, and then continue with the reaming process. The rigid holder for the reamer made a big difference here. You can hear in the way that it cuts, and you can feel if you put your hand on that reamer holder how steady it is. And since we've got perfect alignment, we want to lock it in. I'm not a believer in floating reamer holders when you don't have to use one. That's an entirely different discussion. So this really helped to expedite the process and make it more enjoyable. And after the chamber is cut, I do a light polish with some sandpaper and work on those transitions, cut the entrance. It's about 30 thousandths by 30 thousandths at a 30-degree angle. So overall, a real straightforward process. For the barrel installation, as I mentioned previously, I'm using the Short Action Customs modular barrel vise with the 1.25-inch shank bushing, because that's the shank diameter I had. That's the minimum shank diameter recommended for use with the HR. Just note that if you're ordering a barrel for one. And then I've also got the Short Action Customs modular action wrench with the number 4 head installed. All you have to do is take the bumper off and they slide right on, hand tighten that bumper back on, and then you're good to go. So that works with most of the bat actions. Also using a couple wraps of drywall tape, very effective way to not mar the barrel and prevent slippage. I tightened to 90 foot-pounds, checked my headspace, everything was exactly where I wanted it to be. As I've mentioned in some of the other videos, a typical go and no-go gauge is going to be separated by about 6 thousandths of an inch, and I get my tolerances within 2 thousandths of an inch. I basically want it to be the go gauge plus the slightest amount of breathing room. So if I put in my go gauge and at the bottom of the bolt handle throw I could feel the slightest resistance, I'm good with that. And then when I add a piece of Scotch tape to the back of the go gauge, that's 2 thousandths more, it should definitely not go down. It's a pretty simple method, but it enables you to get that nice tight chamber. After the barreled action was assembled, it was time for Cerakote. And this was my second full barreled action job. The first one was with the Bergara build, and that went well, but I optimized my process a bit this time. Part of that had to do with this Delrin rod that I machined on the lathe right at the diameter of the bore, maybe minus 1/1000th of an inch. And what that does is it slides in place of the bolt and masks off the interior bore of the receiver. because I don't want H series Cerakote, which is not a low friction version. That's what micro slick is for, and that's what I'm going to be doing next. I don't want that on the bolt body or inside the receiver. Now, you might be asking yourself, what about the raceways on the side? And what I ended up using for this particular Cerakote job was some silicone hose that I had as a part of the Cerakote plug kit. I cut little sections down and was able to stuff them in wherever there was an outside entrance to those side raceways. That did a really good job plugging things up. The other thing I did was I did a complete masking job with the rod and the silicone hose sections. I sandblasted the entire barreled action with 100 grit aluminum oxide. Then I pulled this plug and all the silicone tube sections out and did a complete cleaning. Compressed air, some acetone in places, just making sure all the sand and particulate matter was completely out, and then remasked. It's a bit of work, but it's definitely worth it because this job turned out absolutely perfect. Now in the future, what I'm looking at is 3D printing an extrusion that fits not only the cylindrical bore section, but also those side extensions. And that's going to be action specific. But the idea is that you could basically potentially even pull it out prior to baking if needed. And then it's going to eliminate that step of doing the extra masking and potentially the silicone hose sections. So that's something that I'm looking at, and I've talked with the technical team at Cerakote, and they've done that for certain things, including specific microslick applications for barreled actions. This is the kind of thing where tolerances are incredibly important, especially with this type of action. So I did the Cerakote. The Cerakote turned out awesome. I cured it in the Light Armor LA 2500 for an hour at 300 degrees, unmasked everything, and then went through with the assembly. And I was happy because the barreled action that I Cerakoted really matched the factory Cerakote job, which is also FDE, from MDT quite well. You can't even tell that there's a difference. So that made things come together really nicely. Then it was time to look at laser engraving. Okay, so this rifle has 1776 in the serial number. It's called the Freedom Rifle. So I thought, how can I tastefully incorporate kind of the USA theme and the 1776 theme? And I thought, let's do some laser work over the Cerakote. Now this is like magic. When you burn Cerakote with a laser, depending on the frequency and the power output and the speed and your hatching, the hatching is the individual paths that the laser takes in multiple directions to fill in a section. You can get a lot of different looks. Your Cerakote can get burned lighter or darker than the way that it lays down. And in order to get that all dialed in, I used this stainless steel tray, which I had applied Cerakote to during the same time that I was doing the barreled action, put it all in the oven together to cure together. I went through a bunch of different settings, and based on someone from the Laser Everything group, I started with my PMAG settings, which Alex from Laser Everything was very kind enough to share with me. So I experimented with the UR logo, and then I did a grid, which is a grid varying power and speed. And as you can see here, we can go from white to black, basically, and kind of everything in between, which with a bunch of silver tones, a bunch of dark tan tones, and light tan tones. And my thing is restraint and classiness. And to pull that off, I felt like I wanted to go with a real subtle tone-on-tone effect. And I found that, here's my sample 1776 before I hit it on the rifle, with very low power, 10% power, and very slow speed settings. That combination with a 0.05 millimeter hatching spacing, alternating at 90-degree angles, gave an absolutely perfect light tone-on-tone effect. You can look at this with a magnifying glass. It looks just like a separate section of Cerakote laid down. And we did this side here as well. I've got a little bit of video footage of that going down. So laser engraving over Cerakote is amazing because it gives you fine detail that you can't get with stenciling and masking. And it also gives you an efficiency and enables you to get into really convoluted spaces. You can see here we went right over the MDT ESS logo there, and on the magazine there's a rib that the engraving followed perfectly. No headaches. And the fact that we can go lighter and darker means that we can achieve all sorts of tone-on-tone effects. So I'm really excited about this capability. And you're going to see some video content over the coming months and years that's going to really demonstrate that capability. Really, really cool stuff. Okay, so some final notes with the Cerakote. Again, I did not do the bolt body and the inside of the receiver. I did 2 coats. I had a test barrel that I had applied some of the OD green to when I did the Bergara. I used a micrometer before and after. I was at exactly 1/1000th of an inch coating. And that's where I wanted to be. I could go down just a little bit, but there's a trade-off, you know, with the quality of the surface finish. You don't want to apply it too thin or too dry and then applying too thick. Really, you want to preserve all of the engraving on like your rifle action and other parts and not fill that in too thick. I went a little thinner than I did with my initial barrel job that I did on the 224 Valkyrie Boyd stock upgrade. You're going to want to check out that video. I went to the certified applicator training at Cerakote, so I'm applying all of that knowledge, and that really gave me a huge head start. And to have access to their team, really, they do a super good job supporting the industry. So Cerakote job, really happy with that. Here's the finished product. We've got a killer looking custom rifle. We've got this awesome cartridge. The ballistics are absolutely amazing. And if you look at this first group that I laid down on paper, the first 3 shots on paper went into .359 inches. For a Magnum, that is pretty amazing. I was really, really happy with that. And some of the velocities that I observed, 175 ELDX was over 3,000 feet per second, 3,098 at max load. 180 ELDM from factory ammo, 2995. 190 ATIP from some of my reloads, 2876. So the 7 PRC is a winner. I'm really excited about this. I think it's a great long distance match cartridge, and I definitely feel like this is an excellent hunting cartridge for things like elk. Here's what I'd like to know. What do you think about the 7 PRC? What do you think about this awesome long-range rifle build? What do you think about my custom Cerakote job? What do you think about these results and the ballistics? Drop a comment and we'll start a discussion. That concludes this video, and that means it's time to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, where we've got unrestricted content, and Instagram. Make sure to follow us on all those channels. Ultimate Reloader also has a commercial solutions division serving law enforcement, the military, and the gun industry. We have some unique capabilities, including a comprehensive suite of recoil testing and evaluation capabilities, trigger profiling, and more. If you're interested in custom rifles like what we build here on the channel or gunsmithing services, you're going to want to go to rifles.ultimatereloader.com and get on the wait list. If you're interested in becoming a professional gunsmith, check out the Sonoran Desert Institute. They've got a degree program, they've got a certificate program, and you can study from home. Learn more at sdi.edu. Thanks again for watching.